Hello and welcome to Mediation Works. I'm Wendy Lakusta. I'm here with my colleague Sharon Sutherland. And today we're going to do another episode in our series on happiness hacks. Today's focus is on the happy brain chemical that we call serotonin. And so we're going to focus on serotonin. And we have with us our happiness expert today is Dr. Jennifer Wilhoit. Jennifer, welcome. It's so nice to have you on here. Can I ask you to talk a little bit about your background and why you're our happiness expert for the outdoors?
Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here. And all you have to do is say the word nature, and I am happy. My professional life and my personal life revolve around the natural world. I actually work with clients in supporting them in creative projects, but in so doing, I end up incorporating the natural world in many various ways into my work with them. And so I just am a roamer of landscapes and an amateur photographer of those landscapes and creatures and plants and whatever. And so any way I can get out in the natural world, any way I can encourage my people to get out in the natural world, I think is good. So yeah. For healing and peace, but also for joy, just to go out for the sheer pleasure of being in fresh air and beautiful scenery, such as what you see behind me.
That's fantastic, Jennifer. And I know that you and I have talked in the past often about the walks that you take and the ways that you invite other people to be involved in nature walks. And when Wendy and I were looking at just a research around serotonin, one of the things that kept coming up as ways to engage with serotonin and ways to produce serotonin was around nature walks. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about the ways you think about nature walks.
Yeah. Yes, thank you so much. I can. So I just had another idea as you were talking. So actually I have three things I would like to say about nature walks. And one is that, the speed with which I'm moving through or other people are moving through the landscape has a big impact on what chemicals might be released in their bodies and how they're feeling about being in natural landscapes. And so I know that for me, particularly when I'm moving really fast on the landscape, when I'm doing my marathon hikes through the forest up and down and tromping over fallen trees and things like that, I'm not seeing the landscape as much as I'm feeling the landscape. And there's something that really gets activated inside, where my best thinking happens, my best writing happens out on the landscape when I'm moving very, very quickly. And of course, then my body just feels good. But there's this other kind of walking, which is much slower, what I almost want to call a stroll or a meditative stroll, where my body is moving slower, or a person's body is moving slower. And there's a lot more time for observation, for engagement with the landscape, with various objects and entities in the landscape. And so that for me produces a different kind of result. Certainly always happy to be out in nature, but I feel a little more connected to the landscape when I'm moving slowly and can really pay attention and observe and smell and touch things along the way. The third thing I thought of is how I work often with clients out in natural landscapes, which I do. And we create an intention. We work together, the client and I. This is primarily in one-on-one work, but also in retreats and groups. I've done it where we create, each person creates for himself or herself or their self an intention for being on the landscape and an intention for that period of time that they will be out walking in nature. And then when they come back, I ask them to tell the story of that walk on the landscape. And by way of doing that, in that process, healing occurs, peace can come, joy or excitement about something that they might have encountered might all be results of that process. And so I think it's important for us when we're going out into natural landscapes to just take a second to identify, why are we going out? Oh, I'm going out to hike. So that doesn't mean having the 15-minute conversation with a neighbor on the road. It means moving, and just keeping that in mind. Yeah.
Wow, it sounds like you really work with your clients to help them be very present in nature. Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about other ways? I mean, this is what you do, but other ways that you would advise people to get out into the outdoors and into nature, maybe some sort of quick tips to help them out?
Sure. Sure. Thank you very much. So, I mean, I think the very first thing that we don't talk about a lot is being comfortable in the natural world, especially for people that aren't accustomed to going out or always find some other good and important thing to do, which there are plenty of, in lieu of going out. But the first thing is being comfortable, paying attention. Maybe you need to actually look at the temperature on your weather app on your phone, or better yet, step out on the front stoop and see how it feels outside. And if it's starting to drizzle, you might want to have a raincoat, or you might want to have layers. Making sure that your body is well fed and well hydrated. I mean, those are just sort of basics that are also about safety out on the landscape as well as comfort. But also there are really simple ways that we can begin to deepen relationship with the natural world, which I'm all about. And one of those activities I call hands on the landscape. And it's really simple, and it comes out of a difficulty in my life, a life change I was going through about a decade ago. And there were moments where I was pretty stressed out. And so I would go out into the yard, or if I was in the airport, to the planter where the real life plants are growing and there's mud, anywhere I could get something that was non-human alive. And I would put my hands on that. Cold streams in the winter, right on top of snow or ice, into the cool grass or the warm grass, depending on the season. And I did that every day for over a year. And I actually did it like a little research project and documented things, how I was feeling and what was going on and how I felt changed by those moments. But it really was as simple as putting my hands palms down on a surface of the natural world and just pausing. 30 seconds, 10 seconds. If it was really icy snow, maybe 2 seconds. But or sometimes longer, and just kind of crouching there. And also that simple activity afforded me a view of the land that I don't normally get, because I was paused and I was on my haunches looking down. And so I got to see all kinds of creepy crawlies and interesting patterns of frost on leaves and things that I never would have seen otherwise, even walking past that same area. So that's a really, really fun and interesting and ever-changing kind of experience you can have on the landscape. And another thing I think is capturing the landscape in some way. If you like to take photos, so many of us now have cell phones that have cameras. If you like to sketch, even if you think you can't sketch, but you see a beautiful flower. I mean, those are all ways that we can be connected to the land and the objects, the subjects out on the landscape, without having to be an expert or think too hard through anything. And just being out. I mean, if I'm trying to draw a flower and I think, oh my gosh, this is back, like when I was 5 years old kind of drawing, I can still feel excited about having taken the moment to try, taken the moment to get away from the computer, to get away from all of the tasks. And time is different when we're out on the landscape than when we're here in this world. This built world, this technology world. So I encourage people to just get out there however you can, comfortably, with curiosity.
Yeah, I really like I like a lot of those ideas, Jennifer, in particular. I mean, I feel things like getting your cell phone out and taking it with you really resonate with me, because I find when I'm out there, just something that helps me direct my attention so that I remember to focus. If I have my cell phone out and I'm recording as I'm walking down a beach, for instance, I end up with wonderful little things, but I also really notice the small things that are there.
Yes.
I notice the tiny hermit crabs. I notice the barnacles, and you just see things differently. So I definitely all resonates with me. Before we came on and started recording, you were chatting with us about something else that really kind of connected with this topic really well, because another of the things that we see when we look at how do you do quick serotonin hacks, are things like meditation is tied in there. And you were talking a little bit about a meditation practice that sounded really connected to what we're talking about now with the nature walk. And I wonder if you could share that one too.
Yes, I can. Thank you. So I think a lot of people have this idea about meditation that it has to be some way, and there's so many different meditation practices. And I heard something once that was kind of curious, that if for people who tend to be very structured and organized and linear in their life, that to choose a meditation practice, they might want to choose one that's a little looser and more free form. And just the opposite of that, people who tend to be somewhat scattered and kind of go with the flow and just kind of one activity moves into the other, that those people might want to choose a meditation practice that's very structured. And so I actually experimented with that as a meditator for some period of time until it was very clear to me that I needed the loosey-goosey meditation framework for my otherwise very organized and chunk kind of life, especially my work life. But this Buddhist teacher told me about this fantastic practice as I was describing being a little worried and anxious about something, and how it was really hard to even get to the meditation cushion because my mind was just going so fast. And this Buddhist teacher said, here's what I would like for you to try. And this must be done outside. You can do it in your living room, especially if you have a really big living room, but it's better if you do it outside. So go outside where you have space to move. And it can be a field or it can be a track. It's probably not someplace where you need to pay attention to where you're going or you might get lost. And as you move as quickly as you can, not running, but walking at a very, very fast pace. And with each step you take, a count from 1 to 10. And then once you reach 10, backwards from 10 back to 0. And then back up to 10, and moving through the sequence of counting forward and backward with each step. And do that as long as you can kind of keep track of the counting and see what happens. And my goodness, it was a little bit hard at first, because just keeping the counting in the right sequence, because I know how to move very fast on the land, and my mouth when counting wasn't keeping up. But once I was able to match my pace to the numbers and to do a few sequences, it was amazing how calm I felt, how happy, how peaceful, just from trying a practice that for me involved being a little bit more coordinated than normal. Yeah, so it's an interesting practice. And for anybody who's listening to this who might have a tendency to get stressed out, I encourage you to try it. And if 10 is too high to count when you're moving that fast, go 1 to 5 and back, 1 to 5, back down to 1. Whatever it takes, modify these ideas in whatever way possible for you.
Wow, that's fantastic. I'm not very coordinated either, so I have to start with the 5, but that's fascinating. I've never heard that before. So that's coming from a Buddhist monk. That's amazing. That's great.
Yeah. So
Jennifer, before we go, is there anything else that you think would be important to add?
All I would say is, I say this also about writing. You can read about writing, you can talk about writing, you can read, you can examine writing, you can learn all the rules about writing, but you're not actually writing until you're writing. I would say the same thing about the natural world, that I can look out my window, which I have here to the right of me. I can look at all of the nature photos I took on my phone or actual printouts. I can watch nature documentaries on TV, right? But there's no substitute for actually being out in the landscape. And that's where all the goodies are, because at the end of the day, we are all nature. We are all natural creatures. And sometimes we forget that. So I would just say, get out there in whatever way you can, in however limited or broadly
Wow, thanks.
you can get out.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Jennifer. We're going to wrap up now, but I do want to make sure that everybody knows that we're posting links to your website, your blog, your newsletter, all ways that you can find more tips from Jennifer, and so much more information about ways in which you can engage in nature. And Jennifer will also post links to all of your social media accounts so that people can follow you there. I do follow Jennifer in quite a few ways, and I know that I really appreciate getting those just little reminders and hints and suggestions that, oh, you may not have been outside today, but when you see Jennifer's invitation to be outdoors, it's a great way to actually just remind ourselves to do that. So thank you so much for joining us here today, and really appreciate you taking part.
Thank you so much. It has been a true joy to be here talking about my favorite thing ever. Thanks, you guys, for having me.